Jonathan Miller had just turned 58. Nearly 3 decades of his life had been spent building a real estate empire from the ground up. From a modest office in the suburbs of New York, he had clawed his way into the upper tier of developers, recognized for both his ambition and persistence. By all outward appearances, life had finally steadied. His wife, Emily, had been by his side for 27 years, their marriage a fixture in his identity. Their children, Lucas, an engineer on the West Coast, and Amanda, married and living only 20 minutes away, were his pride and joy. For Jonathan, family wasn't merely important, it was the foundation on which everything else rested. That's why the events of one seemingly ordinary Thursday afternoon would shatter him in ways he could never have predicted. He had just left a site inspection, the kind of routine visit he made almost absent-mindedly these days, when the thought struck him, why not surprise Amanda? It had been weeks since they had last sat down for dinner. Amanda was always his confidant, the one who listened without judgment, who encouraged him when Emily grew impatient with his long hours. So Jonathan dialed her number with the familiar warmth in his voice. "Hey, sweetheart, how about dinner tonight? Just the two of us." Amanda's tone was cheerful, apologetic. "Sorry, Dad, I'm not home. Michael's at the house, though. He's buried in case files again. But maybe this weekend." Jonathan smiled into the receiver. "This weekend it is. Love you." He hung up, content. But as he drove past Amanda's quiet neighborhood, the habit of a father tugged at him. A quick glance, a silent check-in. That's when his pulse hitched. There, parked brazenly in Amanda's driveway, was a sleek black Mercedes. Emily's car. The Mercedes was supposed to be in their garage, miles away. A warning bell clanged in his chest. What the hell is Emily doing here? Jonathan slowed his SUV, pulling to the curb with deliberate calm, though inside he was unraveling. He told himself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe Emily had dropped something off. Maybe she and Amanda had planned something she forgot to mention. But Amanda wasn't home. She had said so herself. Jonathan killed the engine and sat still for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Then, curiosity, or perhaps instinct, took over. He got out, his footsteps crunching softly against the pavement as he moved closer. Through the front window, half concealed by curtains, voices carried. He recognized them instantly. Emily's and Michael's. The blood in Jonathan's veins turned to ice. He pressed himself against the siding of the house, careful not to reveal his presence. The words drifted out, sharp and distinct in the autumn air. "When the old man finally signs everything," Emily's voice purred, "we'll have exactly what we planned for." Jonathan's breath caught. "Old man?" Michael's reply was confident, calculated, the voice of an attorney who believed he was untouchable. "The timeline is perfect. File in March, claim irreconcilable differences. With the new statutes, you'll be entitled to half the marital assets, plus lifetime support."
"That's easily over 15 million, Emily, maybe closer to 20 when we include his private investments." Jonathan's body went rigid. His own wife, his son-in-law, plotting? Emily laughed, a tinkling sound that once melted him, now cutting through him like glass. 2 decades of pretending to care about those boring real estate meetings finally pays off. He actually believes I love him. Jonathan staggered back a step, bile rising in his throat. He fumbled for his phone, thumb trembling as he hit record. Inside, Michael continued, smug and meticulous. "We've already cataloged his assets. Bank accounts, property deeds, even his offshore accounts he thought were hidden. He practically handed us the keys to his kingdom." Jonathan's heart hammered. Every word felt like a blade driven deeper. A sound escaped him, a twig snapping beneath his shoe. Both voices inside froze. "Did you hear that?" asked, sharp with suspicion. Probably just the neighbor's dog, Michael muttered, though his tone carried unease. Jonathan pressed himself tighter against the brick wall, every nerve in his body electrified with dread. He waited, lungs burning, until their conversation resumed. Then he backed away, one slow step at a time, until he reached his SUV. Sliding into the driver's seat, he sat in silence. His entire world had shifted on its axis in less than 10 minutes. 27 years of marriage reduced to a legal strategy session. Through the windshield he caught movement, the front door opening. Emily emerged, designer purse slung casually at her side, followed by Michael adjusting his tie with the smug air of a man who thought he had already won. Neither expected Jonathan to be there. Shock flickered across Emily's face like a lightning strike. "Jonathan," she gasped, voice an octave too high, "what are you doing here?" Jonathan forced his face into neutrality, though his pulse thundered. He had spent decades learning to read her moods, but apparently she had been performing all along. "Finished a site visit nearby," he lied smoothly, climbing out of the SUV. Michael stepped closer to Emily, protective, his pale eyes narrowing as they searched Jonathan's expression. "She's not here," Emily said quickly. "I was just helping Michael organize some documents." Jonathan smiled faintly, though every muscle in his body ached with restraint. "Interesting. I thought you mentioned you'd be at the office until 6. Something about a board meeting?" For a split second, Emily's mask faltered. Then she recovered. "I left early. Headache." Michael jumped in, his voice too rehearsed. "It's just some casework, complex asset division, divorce client." The irony almost made Jonathan laugh. "Oh," Jonathan slipped his phone casually into view, as if checking the time. "Well, I'll let you two finish then." Emily's smile was painted on. "I'll be home shortly." "Take your time," Jonathan replied. As he drove away, he caught them in the rearview mirror, standing close, whispering urgently. He gripped the wheel tighter, phone heavy in his pocket. 40 minutes of damning audio. They thought they were playing chess with a fool. They were about to learn their mistake. Jonathan drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring past like streaks of neon. His mind replayed the conversation he had just recorded. Every laugh, every cold calculation, every word Emily had spoken with Michael's encouragement. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated destruction. By the time he pulled into his long driveway, the house that once represented comfort and success felt hollow, like a museum of lies. The manicured lawn, the fountain Emily insisted on installing for their 20th anniversary, the oak door he had designed himself, it all mocked him. Jonathan sat in the SUV, staring at the home he had built, wondering how long it had been an illusion. He thought of the years spent working 16-hour days, skipping vacations, pouring himself into his business so Emily and the kids would never lack anything. Now he realized she hadn't been admiring his dedication, she had been counting the dollars. Inside, silence greeted him. For years, that silence had felt peaceful. Tonight, it was suffocating. He moved to the living room and sank into the leather armchair Emily always called an eyesore. The wedding photo on the mantel caught his eye. December 1997. Emily in ivory silk, radiant, clinging to his arm with the smile of a woman in love, or what he had believed was love. Had it all been performance from the start? Jonathan closed his eyes, letting memories sweep over him. Their first meeting at a charity fundraiser. Emily's laugh at one of his clumsy jokes. The way she had looked at him during their honeymoon in Hawaii. Was all of it scripted? Or had there once been something real before ambition and greed consumed her? On the coffee table lay their 25th anniversary card, still in its silver envelope. Her handwriting, elegant as ever. "To my wonderful husband, thank you for making all my dreams come true." Here's to 25 more years of happiness. Love, Emily. Jonathan picked it up, reading the words over and over until they blurred. Just 6 months ago, she had written this while planning his financial ruin behind his back. He almost laughed, bitter, hollow. The phone recording burned in his pocket. That audio was his only shield now, proof of what Emily and Michael had become. But rage alone wouldn't protect him. Jonathan's strength had always been strategy. He had built his empire not just on bricks and contracts, but on foresight. If Emily thought he was too trusting, too naive, then she had underestimated him in the worst way. Jonathan stood, his expression hardening. He wasn't the same man who had walked up to Amanda's house hours ago, heart full of trust. That man was gone. From this night on, it was war. Jonathan spent the next hours combing through memory, searching for the cracks he had ignored. They had been there all along. He remembered 2021, the year Miller Real Estate landed the biggest contract in its history, a $70 million development project downtown. He had walked into the kitchen expecting celebration, champagne, Emily's embrace. Instead, he found her flipping through a luxury real estate magazine. "This means we can finally buy the house on Lakeshore Drive," she had said, not even looking up. "The one with the infinity pool. They're asking $5 million. Not congratulations, not pride, just expectation. He had laughed it off then, telling her they needed to finalize permits before talking about spending. But Emily had pressed, her eyes calculating, already spending money that wasn't in their account yet. The years that followed were filled with similar moments. The country club membership she demanded because the Wilsons had joined. The luxury vacations she insisted were necessary for appearances. The whispers comparing her lifestyle to other wives. The intimacy between them had faded too, so slowly Jonathan had attributed it to age. Separate bedrooms, separate lives. But now he knew she had been detaching, preparing. And then there was Michael. Jonathan had welcomed him into the family with open arms, smart, ambitious, charming, the perfect match for Amanda, or so it had seemed. Over the years, Michael had asked Jonathan endless questions about his business, how assets were structured, how partnerships worked. Jonathan thought it was friendly curiosity. Now he realized it had been reconnaissance. His stomach clenched as he remembered Michael's smug tone. "We've cataloged everything. He practically handed us the keys." Jonathan wasn't a man who panicked. Decades in business had taught him to anticipate worst-case scenarios. And tonight, as grief gave way to cold resolve, he began building a counterattack. He went into his study, the room Emily rarely entered. Files lined the shelves, contracts, tax records, deeds. Years of meticulous documentation. She thought she had everything she needed, but Jonathan knew she was blind to the real picture. Because the true wealth of Miller Real Estate wasn't visible on paper. He unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were documents known only to him and his accountant of 15 years, Sarah Donovan. Offshore accounts, trusts, shell companies, entirely legal, carefully constructed, invisible to anyone without specialized knowledge. Emily and Michael had been cataloging shadows, while the crown jewels sat safely out of reach. Jonathan allowed himself a grim smile. Let's see how they handle discovering they planned a heist with no treasure. Still, caution was vital. They were smart, ruthless, and desperate. He would need more than hidden accounts. He needed leverage, evidence, allies. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Sarah's number. "Jonathan," she answered, her voice brisk even at 10 p.m. "Is everything all right?" "Not exactly," Jonathan said, his tone steady though his heart still raced. "I need to update our asset protection structures immediately." Sarah was silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. I assume this isn't just estate planning. No, it's domestic. Another pause. Understood. I'll prepare everything by tomorrow. Jonathan, whatever's happening, protect yourself. I intend to, he replied. The next morning, Jonathan's phone buzzed. Amanda. Dad? Her voice carried unease. Is everything okay with you and Mom? She's been off, tense, and Michael keeps asking me questions about your company structure. It feels like they're fishing for something. Jonathan's chest tightened. His daughter was smarter than they gave her credit for. Don't worry, sweetheart, he said softly. Just business stress. Nothing you need to worry about. But as he hung up, the decision crystallized. He couldn't protect Amanda from the truth forever. She deserved to know what her husband and mother were plotting. Just not yet. Not until his own defenses were ready. That night, as Jonathan reviewed his notes under the dim glow of his desk lamp, a calm settled over him. Emily thought she had spent 27 years playing him. But Jonathan had survived cutthroat deals, hostile takeovers, economic crashes. If Emily and Michael wanted war, then war they would have. And Jonathan Miller never entered a battle he didn't intend to win. Jonathan hadn't slept. By dawn, his study looked less like a home office and more like a battlefield headquarters. 2 laptops glowed on the mahogany desk, their screens filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and legal databases. Yellow notepads covered every surface, organized into columns labeled assets, weaknesses, timeline, leverage. It reminded him of the early days of Miller Real Estate, when he had mapped out every risk before daring to bid on contracts. Except this time, the stakes weren't financial, they were personal. Emily wanted half of everything. Michael wanted the rest. Jonathan intended to leave them with nothing. At 8 a.m., Sarah Donovan walked into his office carrying a leather folder. She had been Jonathan's accountant and confidant for 15 years, and though she was only in her mid-40s, she carried the no-nonsense air of someone twice her age. "Jonathan," she said, setting the folder down, "I've drafted the asset protection documents. The offshore trusts, the Nevada holding company, the irrevocable family trust. You'll need to sign here, here, and here." Jonathan flipped through the pages, nodding. "And once this is in place, your visible assets will look leaner. The real wealth will be untouchable. Anyone doing a casual review, say a spouse or an overeager lawyer, will see only what you want them to see." Jonathan signed, each stroke of his pen steady. Sarah studied him. "Do I want to know what's going on?" Jonathan gave a grim smile. "Emily and Michael have been planning to strip me bare, but they underestimated one thing. I've been playing this game a lot longer than they have." Sarah closed the folder and tucked it under her arm. "Then let them come. Just make sure you keep your temper. Angry men make mistakes." "I'm not angry," Jonathan said quietly. "I'm focused." By noon, the first cracks appeared. Jonathan had quietly instructed his bank to place security holds on all joint accounts. Any withdrawal would now require in-person verification and his signature. At 12:14 p.m., Emily called. "Jonathan, something's wrong with our accounts. My card was declined at lunch. When I called the bank, they said access was frozen. Do you know anything about this?" Jonathan let silence linger just long enough to unsettle her. Then, calm as ever, "Strange. Probably just a routine security measure. I'll look into it." Emily hucked, her tone sharp with embarrassment. "It's humiliating. I was with Linda and Carol. I couldn't even pay for my own meal." Jonathan pictured her flushed face, her social mask cracking. "I'll handle it," he said, then hung up. He didn't call the bank. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a grim satisfaction. For years, Emily had taken their financial security for granted. Today, she was tasting what life felt like without his protection. At 3 p.m., Jonathan's phone buzzed with a message from Mike Andrews, a private investigator he sometimes hired for business disputes. Your son-in-law tried to access a joint account with your wife 3 times this afternoon, denied each time. Then he attempted to pull funds from what looks like Amanda's education trust. That's frozen too. Jonathan's jaw tightened, so they were already trying to siphon money behind Amanda's back. Mike continued. He's furious, raised hell with the bank, threatened legal action, demanded to speak with management, looks rattled. Jonathan almost smiled. The confident attorney who had mocked him as an old man was beginning to sweat. That evening, Emily stormed into Michael's office downtown. Jonathan knew this because Mike Andrews had positioned himself in the cafe across the street, camera trained on the glass tower. Through the 12th floor windows, he saw Emily pacing, Michael gesturing sharply. Their conversation carried through the building's dated ventilation system. Mike had a contact in the office next door. "He knows something," Emily hissed. "I couldn't even buy groceries today. He's cutting me off."
Michael's voice was tight, clipped. "It's not coincidence. He must have overheard us the other night, maybe even recorded it." Emily froze. "Recorded? You think he has proof?" Michael shuffled papers. "We have to assume he does, which means we accelerate. No more careful positioning. Monday morning, I file for emergency divorce with immediate spousal support. We frame him as financially abusive, controlling. The frozen accounts? Evidence of intimidation." Emily's voice sharpened. "That could work, but what if Amanda doesn't believe it?" Michael leaned forward, his tone low and dangerous. "Then we use her training against her. She's a psychologist, right? Perfect. We claim Jonathan manipulated her too, turned her skepticism into evidence of emotional abuse." For a moment, silence. Then Emily's brittle laugh. "Poor Jonathan. He really thought being a nice guy would save him." Mike's report landed in Jonathan's inbox that night. He listened to every word, jaw tight, hand steady. So that was their play. Paint him as an abuser, twist his generosity into control, turn his daughter into a weapon. He closed the file, leaned back, and whispered to the empty room, "You've just declared war." Saturday morning, Amanda called again. "Dad, Mom just invited me to brunch. She seemed off, like she wanted to talk about you, but in this weird, rehearsed way." Jonathan hesitated. He couldn't dump the truth on her yet, not without evidence she could see and hear herself. "Go," he said softly. "Listen, just listen carefully." 2 hours later, Amanda texted him. "She tried to tell me you're controlling, said you're restricting her access to money, wanted me to give her a professional opinion. Dad, she was acting like one of my patients, not my mother." Jonathan felt a strange mixture of sorrow and pride. His daughter was sharper than they realized. Soon, she would know everything. But first, he had to finish building the case. That night, Jonathan spread out his notes. He had enough evidence to expose Emily and Michael's betrayal. The audio recording, the PI reports, the financial transfers. But evidence wasn't enough. He needed to break them strategically. Emily's weakness was social reputation. She thrived on appearances, country club brunches, charity galas, whispers of envy from her circle. Strip that away, and she would crumble. Michael's weakness was professional. His law career was already teetering on debt and ethical shortcuts. One push in the right place, and his entire facade would collapse. Jonathan tapped his pen against the notepad, the shape of the plan emerging. Let them think they're in control, let them accelerate, and then pull the ground out from under them. As the clock struck midnight, Jonathan closed his laptop and sat back. Emily thought she had been preparing for this for years. Michael thought he was the clever lawyer pulling strings. But Jonathan had built empires from nothing, survived recessions, crushed competitors twice as ruthless as his son-in-law. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was payback. By Monday morning, Jonathan was ready. He had the recording saved in multiple secure locations, bank accounts locked down, and Sarah Donovan's restructuring complete. His enemies thought they were circling him, but in reality, he had drawn the circle around them. At 9 a.m., Amanda appeared at his office unannounced. She looked different, professional, guarded, her green eyes sharper than he remembered. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, shutting the door behind her. Jonathan rose slowly. "What's on your mind?" "Mom wants me to testify." Amanda's voice wavered only slightly. "She said you've become controlling, manipulative. She wanted me to diagnose you, basically. But it didn't feel right. It felt rehearsed. I need to hear your side." Jonathan studied her for a long moment. This was the crossroads. If he showed her the truth, she would never see her mother the same way again. But Amanda deserved honesty. Wordlessly, he unlocked his phone, pulled up the recording, and pressed play. Emily's voice filled the room. "When the old man finally signs everything, we'll have exactly what we planned for." Amanda sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap as Michael's voice followed, cold and smug. "The timeline is perfect. File in March. Claim irreconcilable differences. Emily will be entitled to half his assets." Then her mother's laugh, sharp, merciless. "He actually believes I love him." Amanda flinched, tears glistening but refusing to fall. She listened through the entire 42 minutes, jaw set, her face pale. When it ended, silence hung between them like smoke. "How long have you known?" she finally asked. 6 days, Jonathan admitted, "and in that time I've been preparing." Amanda exhaled shakily, then straightened. "Mom tried to weaponize me against you, against my training. But she underestimated me, just like she underestimated you." Her voice hardened. "I'll testify. I'll tell the truth." Jonathan reached across the desk, resting his hand gently over hers. "I don't want you dragged into this war, sweetheart." Amanda shook her head. "Dad, I already am, but this time I choose the side of truth." Meanwhile, across town, Emily and Michael were unraveling. Michael's office reeked of stale coffee and panic. Piles of papers covered the desk, but his confidence was gone. "The Bar Association is breathing down my neck," he snapped. 3 subcontractors filed complaints. "If I don't come up with $30,000 by Thursday, I could be disbarred." Emily paced, clutching her designer handbag like a lifeline. "Jonathan's cut me off completely. I can't even get gas without cash. Everyone at the country club knows something's wrong. They're avoiding me." Michael pinched the bridge of his nose. "We have one option left. File for emergency divorce, claim abuse, freeze his accounts by court order before he moves more assets." Emily hesitated. "But we don't have evidence." "Then make some," Michael snapped. "Testify that he controlled you, that he isolated you. We'll spin generosity into manipulation. Every gift he ever gave you, every decision he made, it's all evidence of abuse." Emily's expression hardened. "If we go down fighting." Neither realized that their final assault was already doomed. May 2nd, Davenport County Courthouse. Judge Catherine Reynolds presided, a sharp-eyed woman with no patience for theatrics. Emily sat at the plaintiff's table beside Michael, who looked more like a drowning man than a lawyer. She wore a conservative navy dress, makeup minimal, demeanor meek. The performance of a frightened wife. Jonathan sat across from them, calm in a dark suit, his attorney James Whitaker by his side. Amanda sat in the gallery, her face unreadable. "Mrs. Miller," Judge Reynolds began, "you allege financial abuse and intimidation by your husband. Please describe specific incidents." Emily's voice trembled with rehearsed fragility. "Your Honor, for months Jonathan has restricted my access to accounts, monitored my spending, made threats about leaving me penniless. Last week he froze every card I own. I live in fear of his control."
Jonathan almost pitied her. Almost. The judge turned to James. Defense? James rose smoothly. Your Honor, we have reason to believe these allegations are not only false, but part of a deliberate conspiracy to defraud my client. With the court's permission, I'd like to present Exhibit A. He connected a phone to the courtroom speakers. Emily's eyes widened. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Then her voice echoed through the chamber. When the old man finally signs everything, we'll have exactly what we planned for. For 42 minutes, the courtroom listened. Emily's laughter, Michael's cold calculations, the plan to manipulate Amanda, to twist generosity into abuse, to strip Jonathan of everything. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, expression like carved stone. Mrs. Miller, do you care to explain? Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Her face flushed crimson. Mr. Thompson, the judge asked, do you deny this is your voice? Michael swallowed hard. Your Honor, these recordings are authentic, James interrupted smoothly. Verified by a digital forensics expert this morning. Emily sagged in her chair. Michael buried his face in his hands. Judge Reynolds exhaled. The petition for emergency relief is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation into conspiracy and perjury. Her gavel struck like thunder. The fallout was swift. Within a week, Emily was exiled from her social circle. The country club suspended her membership. Charity boards rescinded invitations. Her friends stopped returning calls. Michael's career disintegrated even faster. The Bar Association confirmed misuse of client funds. His license was suspended, pending permanent disbarment. His largest clients terminated contracts, citing ethical concerns. By summer, he was bankrupt. Amanda filed for divorce, moving into her own apartment. When Jonathan offered to help, she smiled sadly. No, Dad, I need to rebuild on my own, but thank you for showing me the truth. Emily, stripped of wealth and reputation, took a retail job at a boutique in the same mall where she once flaunted his money. Michael vanished to another state, rumored to be working as a paralegal. 6 months later, Jonathan sat alone on the porch of the home he had built, watching autumn leaves drift across the lawn. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. No more calculated affection, no more manipulation. Just quiet, honest solitude. He thought of Emily's words. He actually believes I love him. She had been right. He had believed, but not anymore. Now he knew the difference between performance and love. And though he bore the scars of betrayal, Jonathan felt something surprising stir within him, hope. Because in the end, he had survived. And not just survived, he had won. The Miller estate was quiet now, almost too quiet. Jonathan sometimes wandered the halls late at night, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. For nearly 3 decades, the house had been filled with Emily's voice, sometimes sharp, sometimes sweet, always present. Now, silence reigned. At first, it had been disorienting. He caught himself expecting to hear her humming in the kitchen or the faint click of her heels across the hardwood. But gradually, that silence transformed from emptiness into peace. The absence of her voice was a reminder he was finally free. Jonathan began rediscovering parts of himself he had buried long ago. He cooked meals again, simple, hearty dishes Emily used to sneer at. He invited Lucas home for long weekends, father and son bonding over football games and grilled steaks. He met Amanda for weekly lunches, their conversations honest for the first time in years. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was renewal. Emily's world, once polished and enviable, had shrunk to the size of a department store. She worked behind the counter at a boutique that sold handbags half as expensive as the ones she used to buy without blinking. Her former friends passed by occasionally, pretending not to notice her. Those who did recognize her wore pity on their faces like cheap perfume. At night, she sat alone in her rented apartment, scrolling through old photos of charity galas, luxury vacations, her children's graduations. She told herself she had only wanted security, only wanted recognition. But deep down, she knew greed had hollowed her out. The woman who once defined herself by appearances was now invisible. Michael's spiral was uglier. The Bar Association confirmed permanent disbarment. Headlines followed. Promising attorney disbarred for misuse of client funds. His reputation, once his greatest weapon, was in ruins. He moved to Ohio under a different name, working as a paralegal for a fraction of his former salary. He drank too much, gambled what little he earned, and avoided mirrors. At 37, Michael had believed he would own the world. Instead, he had destroyed his marriage, his career, and his future in less than a year. Jonathan didn't think of him often anymore. When he did, it was with the detached pity one might feel for a reckless gambler who had lost everything at the table. Amanda's divorce was finalized quietly. She moved into a sunlit apartment overlooking the Hudson River, throwing herself into her psychology practice. Her specialty shifted. She began focusing on family therapy, on helping clients recognize patterns of manipulation and emotional abuse. "I learned the hard way," she told Jonathan one afternoon over coffee. "But maybe that means I can help others see the signs before it's too late." Jonathan squeezed her hand, pride swelling in his chest. His daughter wasn't just surviving, she was transforming pain into purpose. By the following spring, Jonathan's life had settled into something unexpectedly fulfilling. Miller Real Estate continued to thrive. Clients admired not just his business acumen, but his resilience. His reputation, burnished by years of honesty and reinforced by surviving betrayal, attracted more opportunities than ever before. But Jonathan wasn't chasing money anymore. He was chasing something simpler: peace. On weekends, he worked in the garden, hands deep in soil. He joined a local community board, mentoring young entrepreneurs. He even considered dating again, tentatively, carefully, with the caution of a man who had learned the cost of misplaced trust. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Amanda joined him on the porch. "You seem happier, Dad," she said softly. Jonathan nodded, watching the horizon glow. "I am. For the first time in a long time, I feel whole." Amanda leaned her head against his shoulder. "You deserve that." For a moment, silence stretched between them. But this silence was different. Not empty, not lonely. It was peace. Jonathan often thought back to Emily's cruelest words. "He actually believes I love him." Yes, he had believed. He had trusted too deeply, blinded himself to the warning signs. But betrayal, as devastating as it was, had given him clarity. He now understood that love without honesty is only performance, that trust without respect is only exploitation. And though scars remained, they no longer weighed him down. Jonathan Miller had faced betrayal, conspiracy, and ruin. But in the end, he had rebuilt, not just his fortune, but himself. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all.